Hello, welcome to another installment of To the Edge. This is the third of 4th episodes, focusing on the web series Family Problems, produced by Seth Chitwood. And this is actually the first of 2 episodes with our guests this week. That is Natasha Hatalski as Detective Christina Elliott.
Hello.
Wendy Hartman as Detective Rebecca Ellison.
Hi.
And John Samela as Chief Alexander Hudson.
Hello.
And of course, as always, my co-host Mike Messier.
Glad to be here, Roland. Thank you so much. We have some great guests, and looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, we had a lot of great insights in the last 2 episodes on family problems, and we hope to gain even more with these next 2 episodes. So, to kick this off, I'm going to ask, how did you all prepare for the roles? And maybe discuss a little bit about them as well.
You want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So I play Detective Christina Elliott, and I did a lot of research for this role, including researching serial killers and profiling and some exciting things like that. I also spent a lot of time working on my character's background, and because the scripts are so extensive, especially season 2, which we're about to head into, and we're about to start filming season 3, a lot of time, yes, very exciting. And spent a lot of time working on the lines and figuring out why my character was saying what she was saying, why she would say that rather than something else, especially because I do a lot of interrogations in the show.
I play Chief Hudson, sort of the, well, I took the middle management approach. I didn't really focus more on detective work as it was, seeing as he corrals the detectives to do what they're going to do. I sort of went with the approach of, all right, how would somebody managing anything deal with a situation like this? And sort of done more, middle management thinking, how to put people where they go, and less about the detective work. I leave it up to my detectives. So, yeah.
And I play Detective Rebecca Ellison. And one of the luxuries of working on this web series is that we had ample time from the time we got the scripts until the time we actually started filming, so we could actually do not just our own work on our own with the backgrounds of our characters and work on your own character development, but also we had time to do team building exercises with the other actors. We did character development workshops at our director's house. We had police training, full day sessions. We had all of that incorporated into this 3 months of prep work so that when we got to the set to film, we were really able to do that and have our characters fully developed at that point, which was such a luxury to be able to do that. And you don't often get that in this independent world.
Right.
Right.
Well,
and I just want to interject something here and say also one of the luxuries of working on a series is that you actually have a character arc. Your character really has a chance to develop over the space of 3 seasons.
That's awesome. And you guys, as you were saying, Natasha, put the time into the research of your characters. And could you get specific on the research? What do you mean by research? Just for the people out there that may be actors or thinking about getting into acting, and they want to know, what would I do? Sometimes they don't get that guidance that you've had, and what would they do for character research exactly?
Well, part of it for me starts with knowing the character's background.
Okay.
So your character, when you get the script, that's one moment in time, basically, or a few moments in time. Your character actually has a much more extensive life than that and a much more extensive history. And when I start with a script, I sit down and I decide for each thing that my character does, what drives that. And usually there's something in their background that decides how they go about their life. So if my character is super intense and really focused and will never ever back away from a fight, there's got to be some reason behind that.
Right.
That didn't come from nowhere. So I make actual decisions for my character about why those things are true for her, what her education was, where she was educated, why does she work in Boston, for example. Why is she so dedicated to cold cases is another interesting factor. And building off of that, when I go to look for research information about detectives, about profiling, etc., I go looking for things that would drive a character like mine. And interestingly enough, there are a lot of stories out there from real police detectives, and the real police detectives all have really good reasons why they're so tenacious. You know, especially the people who really work cold cases and stuff. For most of them, there's a case that started it all. You know, there's a case that they really deeply care about, that they work on their whole life, and they may never crack it, or they may get lucky and actually crack that case. But there's something behind them that really drives them along this path.
Right. I know a retired police officer in Rhode Island, a friend of mine, who has been retired for a while, and then when the Marathon terrorist incident happened several months ago, he was like, Mike, I want to get back in the game. You know, he was just,
Yeah.
as tragic as the event was, and he fully knew the tragedy, he just had that urge to go back in there and investigate and see what he can do to help.
The feeling of making a difference.
Yeah, perfectly
Absolutely.
What
stated.
drives you? Yeah, and
Yeah.
in my case, when I looked at the script, if you just looked at the script, you would probably classify my character as a villain. So as an actor playing that, you know, a villain doesn't necessarily think of themselves as a villain. So
Right.
as an actor, I had to come up with her background to justify that what she was doing had reason behind it, and that she was doing what she thought was right and to get what she wanted, and she can justify everything she does. You know, is she a good guy who does bad things, or is she a bad guy who does good things? I don't know. I'm going to leave it up to the audience to decide, but I had to give her a background that made her a real person, not just a villain, you know?
I just want to say that it's very good that in this program, you actually have the audience having to struggle to figure out for themselves if the character is a good person who does bad things or vice versa, instead of just spelling it out and telling them what to think. We need more of that in programs.
Yes, there are lots of levels here, and Wendy's comment comes into play for my character as well, because my character on the face of it is a very good person in some ways. She's very good at her job, she's very tenacious, she really is seeking for the truth. But there are other aspects of her character, and she's not as simple as that. And that starts to come out over the course of the seasons as we move ahead. And so I think that that's one of the beauties of this particular program. Family Problems basically delves into real human beings and how kind of messed up they can be.
Yeah, exactly.
And whether their actions result in something good or something bad, they're all a quite complicated and interesting mix.
And you can completely credit the creator and writer Seth Chitwood with what you were saying about making the show not so obvious, not so, you know, regular TV. It is a show that definitely leaves you hanging at the end and wondering, and that is a great thing.
From what I understand, Wendy and Natasha share a pretty dramatic scene together in season 2. Can you tell us anything about it?
We cannot talk about that, but we can state that our relationship might be classified as adversarial,
So that's a fair assumption, yeah.
deeply adversarial, perhaps. And
What enemies?
On opposite ends of
On opposite
this,
ends,
this
yes.
conversation we have takes place over 6 pages of dialogue, and it's a mind game. We are, you know, two actors who brought to the table a background. We had a history together, which we discussed extensively, our relationship. We actually, even right before the scene, went outside and used some of our police training physical techniques of attacking each other physically, just to bring that physical element into the room, even though it's just a conversation between the two of us, to see it's sort of a mind game of who can stay in control of this conversation.
well, and I think one of the most wonderful things that we should mention here actually is the police training that we received. We trained with Charlie and Mel Alejandro, and Charlie is a retired state trooper who used to work in homicide, and Mel Alejandro is a current state trooper who used to work in drug enforcement and also specializes in interrogation. And we have had multiple training sessions with them, and partly this is also a credit to Seth, because he is very dedicated with this show to trying to be very accurate. He did not want to be yet another cop show where,
Right.
you know, the cops are pointing their guns all over the place, and, you know, but it went a lot deeper than that, ultimately. We did extremely extensive training with them, everything from clearing rooms, gun handling, testifying in court, how to build a case, crime scene handling, and also drills, which is part of what Wendy's touching on here. We did some physical work with them, and the physical work was very key to, I think, us developing a good working relationship between us for our characters. Because one of the things they had us do was actual self-defense, attacking and self-defense work, as well as the kind of military drills that we went through. And so with the military drills, we learned to establish the hierarchy, and we do maintain that through the training. So she is always my superior through the training, whether I like it or not.
Yes.
And also this kind of attack and defense thing, it's very interesting, and that's specifically what we used before our scene, before we had to do that scene, because it very clearly and forcefully establishes the adversarial relationship between the two of us without our having to work on anything else. I mean, we're fighting each other, basically, and it's excellent. It's a wonderful, marvelous gift that they gave us with that training.
How challenging was the training?
It was challenging.
It was.
It was-
Well, having no background, obviously, in law enforcement, they kind of have you do it first, and then they tell you all the things you've done wrong. So it really points out that we have no idea what we're doing. And, to be able to handle a gun, to draw it, and be able to hold it, you want that to be second nature when you're on the set. You don't want to be thinking about where my finger is on the gun or is it going to fall out of the holster. You want to do it with confidence, like you've done it a million times in training and over the years that you've been on the force. And that's what they gave us. They had us do it. They told us what we did wrong. They watched us over and over again. And then you leave there and you go home and you practice more and more and more so that when you get to the set, it's second nature. Everything they taught us, how we walk, how to talk. They taught us how to use our voices to be more authoritative in a situation where you might need that. And how to think like a detective if you walked into a room and there was a dead body, not just seeing the obvious, but how to look around and really look at that scene. And then how to talk again through interrogation techniques and the reason behind those techniques and actually having us do those. It was just how to talk, walk, and think like a detective for me. And without that, I would have been, it would have been a cliche. You don't want to play a cliche. Invaluable.
Now you have that training for other roles that might come up, for other auditions, put that on your resume. So if you get into a situation where you're auditioning for another director's piece and you have that training, what a valuable thing to bring to the table.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yep, I've already
Yeah.
used that.
Oh, you want to tell us about that, or is that under wraps?
Yeah, it's nothing that has I can talk about officially, but I went to an audition and I brought the gun with me because in the
Wow.
scene, right before you speak, she's loading a weapon. And I came with my gun, showed them that it was a safe and clear gun that wasn't, fully loaded. And then I loaded it right before I'm supposed to say my line, as it says in the script. And I got a call back. It's not official yet, but it was just great to have that confidence and experience to be able to bring that to the table, like you were saying.
Yeah, that's fantastic. John, tell us about yourself, buddy. Let's get you in the mix here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you've been too quiet.
I'm a quiet guy, speak when spoken to kind of guy.
Well, you're being spoken to now.
All right, well, tell about myself, not much to tell. Just a guy
Okay.
with, got into acting in my early 20s and moved to Massachusetts a couple years ago, and pretty much as far as film or TV goes, Family Problems has been one of the only things I've done.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What drew you to Family Problems?
What's that?
What drew you to Family Problems?
Well, I was looking for auditions in general, and I saw this. Actually, I was auditioning for Seth for another show he does, World's Worst Director, and I auditioned for that, and he saw me, he liked me for this role, and asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said sure. So, yeah. Sorry, not really much of a.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were talking off camera, and you are a regular guy with an irregular job as far as your non-acting life. Tell us about that.
I drive a Zamboni at the Fessenden Ice. Well, it's the Coffin Ice Rink, but it's at the Fessenden School in West Newton, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And drive a Zamboni, sharpen skates. And my other job is I drive a forklift overnight at A. Dewey Pile in Northborough. So I'm always working.
This
never
is
sleeping.
like a guy's dream jobs. I think, especially the Zamboni.
Well, the funny thing is I've never watched hockey. I've never even skated in my
Okay.
life. I just happened to fall into this job, and it's fun. It definitely
Yeah.
is fun. But I've never I didn't know how impressive it was because I never watched hockey.
Right.
I just okay, I'm just driving another piece of machinery. So yeah.
The Zamboni, Roland, as you know, is that giant machine that smooths out the ice during intermissions of a hockey game, and I've always found them fascinating as a hockey fan. You know.
Yeah, a lot of people like ask me about that, and and it's fun, but really it's work.
Yeah.
And I'll work 70 hours a week only so that I can do filming.
Wow,
like
70
family
hours.
close to 70 hours a week, just
How
so
do
I
you
can.
not die?
Again, I sleep when I can, and the only free time I get is when I get to film. Like Family Problems has been a godsend, because if not for that, I'd probably go insane. So.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I used to work 3 jobs at one point. It was too much for me. Way too much.
And the good thing about Family Problems is because, as an actor, you never know where your next gig is going to be, because, season 1 has finished now. Season 2, we're wrapping, and it airs next month on November 14th, 9 o'clock on Thursday night. And then we're going to start filming season 3 next month. It keeps you going so that if you don't have a lot of time to go out and audition for other things, as a guy who has a degree in acting, you're too
Right.
humble, this is something you get to do. So it's
Yes.
given us
Yeah.
all that opportunity, and
Yeah.
so we're grateful for that.
No
Yeah.
need to be humble on this show. You're here to talk about yourself.
It's unheard of for me, but thanks.
All right, well, you're off the hook. We'll switch back to our other 2 guests. And I have a question that's specifically for you. What's it like representing women in the criminal justice system?
Well, for my character, the background that I created for her, her father had left her, abandoned her and her mother when she was little. Her mother was a victim of a brutal crime caused by a male. She decided early on in life she was not going to let herself be the victim in a male-dominated world, and she would do whatever it took to make sure that didn't happen. So when she went into law enforcement, so she would have the power and resources to do that, she doesn't see gender. For her, it's not male and female. It is those who can help her get what she wants and those who get in the way of getting what she wants. That's how my character views it. She doesn't see herself as a female cop.
And you said that there's some layers to this character that are maybe some would say bad or
Questionable?
questionable is a good word, controversial, and that's what you were saying before about the villain doesn't realize that the villain is a villain. Bad guy doesn't know that he's bad,
Right.
or in this case, bad guy doesn't know that she's bad. So to play these characters against your type, you seem like a very friendly person and good person. So to kind of go into that dark side, is that fun for you? Or?
Well, it is. I didn't
Yeah.
know how much fun it was going to be, but which is a little scary. I'm scaring my husband with that. And the gun, I really enjoy holding the gun. But other than that,
Me too.
But like I said, I believe, even though she might be doing some things that would be questionable
Right.
to others and obviously, not appropriate, she truly believes she's doing them for what she thinks is right
Right.
and what's important to her. And that's all that matters to her. So in my mind, playing her, I'm just doing what I need to do to get through life and to get what I want, like everybody else. I don't really see it as evil.
So these, acting terms, super objective, objective. The super objective for your character, which is what she really wants, is
Well, it changes. She's a detective in the present day, and then we also shoot decades later where she's in her 70s and she's the sergeant at the Boston Police Department. In the present day, she has a past romantic history with one of the main characters, and he's married with children. And she comes into his life to help him as a detective, but having not gotten over him definitely affects a lot of the things she does. So her objective in that period of time is him.
right.
Is his love. And in the future, she's been through decades of living with her choices, and she's gotten colder and harder. And I think at that point, it's about self-preservation, protecting her reputation as the sergeant, and making sure she can do whatever it takes to maintain that until the end of her time.
We talked about that last episodes with what's her name? Teresa was our guest.
Yeah,
Yes,
Teresa.
Teresa. Yeah.
Yes, she was great, and she was telling us what it's like as a challenge to play a character in 3 different time stages of life. Do you guys want to talk about that as well?
I think I'm the only, they both are in the
Yeah,
future.
we're both
in the
So I'm the only one who does that. I have yet to do the past. I am currently in 2 stages of life. And, physically, obviously, you're changing over a 30-year span, the way you walk, the way you look. We went extensive hair and makeup and all of that stuff. So you have the physical aspect, but then you do have that, it's been 3 decades, and what's happened to her in those 3 decades. It made my particular character, I think, a little colder and a little harder, and probably a little even more on that dark side as she aged. So you have to
Wow.
play that as well, and keep that in mind when you're playing that
it's-
time period.
Not just mentally, it's also physically. How do you physically make yourself 70-something?
Well, so physically, you hunch over a little more. assuming that she's, kind of has that going on. And the way you walk, I had to run at some point, and I wouldn't bolt down the hallway of the police department. I had to run a little slower and move a little more awkwardly. And she wears glasses and has a little trouble seeing. And
Sounds like me now. What do you?
and having the makeup and the hair really helps, because you really can see it all transforming. I think it helps.
That's great. That's great. And
Yeah. What's Chief Hudson and Elliot's relationship?
Well, I'm kind of pretty much her boss.
Yes,
one of her
he's
bosses.
my boss.
One of her bosses. And well, it's funny. We both talked about this when we shot season 1, and she had a much different idea of what my character was, and I had a much different idea what her character was. So at first, it was very kind of, I don't know, like you would any boss. I would say.
Yes,
Like you kind of feel
yes.
like any boss. You kind of hate your boss even if they got to
I
do
mean,
the job.
you toe the line a little too much.
I do,
You're
but
very much by the book, and it drives me nuts.
it drives you nuts because I have a job to do to protect you and other detectives.
yeah,
so
but you don't understand what's necessary to actually get the job done on
and
some of
that's
these
why
cold
I
cases.
trust you to get the job
That's
done.
right.
But when I have to cover your behind because of the stuff you're doing, it kind of makes it a little
Yeah,
difficult.
well,
Is this,
Well,
is this method acting? Or?
Yeah,
You sound like the perfect guy for a desk job.
yeah, that's
yeah.
kind of how I feel.
Pretty much
Hudson
what he is.
He's more of a career path, looking to further his career, but at the same time not screwing over his detectives. I think he cares very much about his detectives, but I think over the process of shooting, we've sort of filmed like a more kind of buddy. Like if your friend was your boss all of a sudden,
Yeah.
it's like with a conflict that happens there. It's sort of a little buddy.
Well, and actually, interestingly enough, this is one thing with the series as well, which is that we don't get all of the scripts at once. So you only get the piece that's been revealed to you. And originally, our relationship seemed to be defined in a certain way. And I believe it has transformed a bit over time.
right.
And one of the things that Chief Hudson does is he stands up for me. I'm not the easiest person to manage. But he, although he is torn between his duty to doing things the right way and his belief in me as his detective, he does actually try to protect me and stand behind my decisions. And it's very hard for him sometimes.
I can say this much: season 2 features a lot more detectives.
Yes.
There's a lot more in the future as far as police work goes. You were sort of bearing it all yourself for the first season. So for this season, I think she's got a little more help, and there's more relationships in that regard.
Would you say that that's the biggest difference between seasons 1 and 2?
As far as I go, I mean,
Well, in
that's not
general.
the biggest. No, I mean, it's one of the biggest.
Don't spoil
but-
anything.
Well,
Yeah.
season 1 is definitely an intimate look at this family and what happens to them, and there is a glimpse into the future and the past. And season 2 does have, I think, a little more focus and becomes a little bit more of a crime drama thriller type show, and that you are in the future trying to look back at what happened to this family. So it does sort of, I think there is much more of a focus in the crime.
Well, and I also think that it expands on the definition of family problems. So you've got a family and you've got problems in that family in season 1, and then all of a sudden in season 2, we break open this entire world of the police department, where, I mean, these are people who back each other up in dangerous situations. These are people who are probably responsible for saving each other's lives sometimes, but they also have their issues. And we get a big tie-in into that world between the family problems of the family and the family problems that exist within the police department itself.
Nicely put. The way that you guys describe the show is, the writing and the acting sounds so terrific. It's like, when is this going to be picked up for a major network? And
Yeah, I know.
But it's not even a joke, because these days people have so many channels to fill with programming. You have your premium cable, your basic cable, and your network. And they always, even my own father says they always need programming. So I mean, something like this, Family Problems, get it to the right people, the right network at the right time. And you guys are in a good position because you've established characters, you tie in with Seth, the director, writer, producer of the series. It really take off. It's very exciting, I would think.
It is exciting. And I think one of the things that's wonderful about season 2 as well is that the cast has expanded quite a lot. So in season 2, We added, I believe, 10 more people. Is that correct?
Something
Yeah, you said
That's what I
last
heard in the
week,
previous
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
we brought on some really absolutely amazing actors for season 2. We're so delighted with the people that came on board with us.
Yeah.
That is great. How challenging are the interrogation scenes?
Well, that's mostly me, so and Teresa, and they're very challenging. I think that it makes for a long day, especially because, as you probably know, we don't necessarily film things in order.
Right.
So if an interrogation scene happens at the end of a given episode, we are going to film all of the interrogation scenes because they take place in that one room. So we film by location as opposed to chronologically.
Right.
So when we filmed all of the interrogation scenes in season 1, that was one day. So we did them all lined up in one day. And they're intense. I
Yes.
mean, my job as the detective is to lean on her and manipulate her
Yeah.
and twist her around so that I can get her to give me the story and the true story. And I'm not sure whether I believe her. I have to read her every single minute. And that's one thing where the police training comes into it. One of the things that we were told in police training by Charlie and Mel was when you're interrogating somebody, you never stop looking at them.
Wow.
You almost never look down. So you're watching and reading every single little twitch movement, lip, slide to the side or something. Whatever it is, you're reading it constantly.
You're doing that to me right now.
We're going to
nervous.
stare at you
Yeah.
Hitting
Roland, I
you
think
with
we're-
the cops do.
intently.
we're running out of time on this episode, Roland, but these guys are coming back for our next episode.
Yes, but right before we wrap up, I just have one question really quick that I have to ask. When you're doing the multiple scenes in a day, it got me wondering, this being a web series, how many scenes do you typically shoot in a day?
Wow, it depends on the day and it depends on what we need for the location. I've been on location as little as 3 hours for something and as much as, 12, 13, 14, depending.
Wow, that's quite a bit of diversity. And on that note, we're going to cut it off and we'll see you next time on To the Edge. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.